In 1935, a man walked into the hotel president in Kansas City, Missouri. Little did he know that his stay in room 1046 would be his last. What began as a routine hotel visit soon descended into a dark and twisted sequence of events, leading to a gruesome murder that has puzzled investigators for decades. Who was this mysterious guest? What secrets did he hold? What really happened in room 1046? On January 2nd, 1935, at 1:20 p.m. in the afternoon, a man walked into the hotel president and checked into room 1046. He gave his name as Roland T. Owen and requested an interior room several floors up for one night, with a Los Angeles home address given. Staff in the hotel described him as a man in his early 20s, well-dressed, wearing a dark coat, and carrying no luggage. The man was said to have a visible scar on his head and brown hair. Randolph Propst, a bellboy, accompanied Owen to the 10th floor and entered room 1046 at the guest's request to overlook the hotel courtyard. Owen walked through a short entryway, closet to his right, bathroom to his left, and saw the room itself. The bed was to his right, and the small stand with the telephone to his left. Inside the room, Owen unpacked only a hairbrush, comb, and toothpaste from his overcoat pockets. He placed those items in the bathroom, and he and Propst would leave the room quickly after. Propst would proceed to give the room key to Owen and make his way towards the main lobby. After returning to the lobby, he would see Owen leaving the hotel shortly after. A short time after, one of the maids, Mary Soptic, would enter room 1046 to clean it. Upon entering the room, she would find Owen in the room as well. She noticed that Owen had drawn the shades and left only one dim lamp on. She described Owen's current actions as,
"He was either worried about something or afraid. He always wanted to kind of keep in the dark."
After cleaning for a few minutes, Owen would put on his overcoat, brush his hair, and leave. But before leaving, he would ask Soptic to leave the room unlocked as he was expecting some friends in a few minutes. Later that day, at around 4 p.m., Soptic returned to the room with freshly laundered towels. Upon entering inside, the room was dark, and she would see Owen lying on the bed fully dressed. Visible in the light from the hallway was a note on his bedside table that read, "Dawn, I'll be back in 15 minutes. Wait." The very next morning, on January 3rd, Soptic returned to room 1046 at approximately 10:30 a.m. She assumed Owen was out as the door was locked from the outside, but upon opening it with her own key, she found him sitting in the dark at the same spot as the previous day before. The phone would ring and Owen would answer, saying the following:
"No, Dawn, I don't want to eat. I am not hungry. I just had breakfast. No, I am not hungry."
The maid would leave shortly after an exchange of words. Soptic would soon return to room 1046 again later that day at around 4 p.m. with fresh, clean towels. Upon approaching the door, she could hear two men talking, so she decided to knock. A voice she described as loud and deep, not Owen's, asked
who it was.
She would promptly respond that she had fresh towels. However, the voice would reply with,
"We don't need any,"
even though Soptic knew that there were no towels in the room since she had removed them in the morning. That afternoon, Jean Owen, a 30-year-old woman, reported hearing loud arguments and conversations coming from room 1046. Jean Owen was staying in room 1048, right next door, and stated that that night she heard, quote,
"Heard a lot of noise which sounded like it was on the same floor, and consistently largely of men and women talking loudly and cursing. When the noise continued, I was about to call the desk clerk, but decided not to."
A little before 11 p.m. later on that day, a man named Robert Lane was driving on 13th Street. Lane worked for the Kansas City Water Department. As Lane approached Lydia Avenue, he would see a man running west on the north side of the street. This man was wearing trousers, shoes, and an undershirt, nothing else. Mind you, this is in January, so the weather was still a bit chilly, so this seemed out of the ordinary. The mysterious man waved and shouted to Lane to stop. As he neared Lane's vehicle, he decelerated, his brow furrowing in confusion. He expressed regret, stating,
"I apologize, I mistook your car for a taxi,"
and proceeded to scan the streets, continuing with,
"Will you take me to where I can get a cab?"
Lane nodded and the man hopped in to catch a ride. As Lane took a quick glance at the man, he shifted gears and directed his vehicle towards the intersection of 12th and Truce. He observed the man silently via the rearview mirror and took note of the sizable gash on his left arm. Lane couldn't help but notice that the man was clasping his hands together as if attempting to contain blood from a wound that ran deeper than the mere scratch on his arm. As the car drew near the intended crossroad, the man expressed his gratitude to Lane and swiftly disembarked from the vehicle. He then proceeded to sprint towards a parked taxi on the driver's side, leaving Lane to continue on his way. Lane would then drive off, not thinking much of the interaction. The next day, on January 4th at 7 a.m., a new switchboard operator, Della Ferguson, would come in for her shift that day. She was preparing to make a requested wake-up call to room 1046 when she noticed a light indicating that the phone was off the hook. Props, who had previously taken Owen to room 1046, was assigned to the room once again. Upon approaching the room, he found the door was locked and had a "Do Not Disturb" sign hanging from the doorknob. Props would continue to proceed and knock on the door. However, despite several loud knocks, he couldn't enter the room as the door was locked, until suddenly a voice from inside would ask him to
"Come in and turn on the lights."
But still, he couldn't enter. Eventually, Props shouted through the door to hang up the phone and left. Props would head back down to the main lobby and tell Ferguson that Owen was probably drunk in room 1046 and that they should wait around another hour. An hour would pass and it would be around 8:30 at this point that they would make another attempt to access room 1046 as the phone had still not been hung up. Harold Pike, another bellboy, would be sent instead of Props. Harold Pike would make his way up to the 10th floor and approach the room, finding the "Do Not Disturb" sign still on the locked door of room 1046. However, Pike had a key and used it to enter the room. Inside, he saw Owen lying naked and drunk on the bed in the dark. The hallway light revealed some dark stains on the bedding, but instead of turning on the room light, Pike went to the telephone stand and put the phone that was on the floor back on the stand, replacing the handset, finally leaving the room. Time would pass from this occurrence when once again at approximately 10:30 a.m., one of the operators will report that the phone from room 1046 would be off the hook once again. Props, the first bellboy, would be sent to room 1046 to investigate. Approaching the door, he would notice that the "Do Not Disturb" sign is still on the doorknob. Props would give several knocks that gave no response from Owen. Props would then use a key given to him to enter room 1046. However, upon entering the room, the mood would suddenly take a shift. Opening the door, Props would find Owen on his knees and elbows with his head bleeding, just 2 feet away from the door. Props would immediately turn on the lights and put the phone back on the hook, but after glancing around the room, Props would then notice blood on the walls of both the main room and bathroom, as well as on the bed itself. This would frighten Props and he would quickly make his way downstairs to seek assistance. Props would state, quote,
"When I entered the room, this man was within 2 feet of the door, on his knees and elbows, holding his head in his hands. I noticed the blood on his head. I then turned the light on, placed the telephone receiver on the hook. I looked around and saw blood on the walls, on the bed, and in the bathroom. This frightened me. I immediately left the room and went downstairs."
Props would return to room 1046 once again with the assistant manager. However, when they arrived back at the room, they could only open the door 6 inches because Owen had fallen onto the door. Eventually, Owen got up, and when the 2 hotel employees were able to enter the room, he went and sat on the edge of the bathtub. The assistant manager called the police. They shortly were joined with detectives and Dr. Harold Flanders of Kansas City General Hospital. Upon inspection, Owen appeared to have been bound with a cord around his neck, wrists, and ankles. His neck had further bruising, suggesting someone had been attempting to strangle him. He had been stabbed more than once in the chest above the heart. One of these wounds had punctured his lung. Blows to his head had left him with a skull fracture on his right side. Dr. Flanders cut the cord from Owen's wrist, and a detective asked him who had done this to him. Owen would answer, "Nobody." Asked again what happened to him, Owen would claim that he had fallen and hit his head on the edge of the bathtub. The doctor would ask if he had tried to commit suicide. However, Owen would respond with no. And after these exchange of words, Owen lost consciousness and was taken to the hospital. He was completely comatose by the time he arrived and died shortly after midnight on January 5th. Doctors performed an autopsy on Owen and determined he had died from his wounds. According to Dr. Flanders, the wounds were
inflicted 6 to 7 hours earlier, as the blood on the body had become a hard mass, and the blood on the walls and furniture had solidified.
Therefore, the stabbing and cutting likely occurred well before Prop's 7 a.m. trip to 1046. Even oddly enough, when detectives searched room 1046, they were not able to find much evidence lying around. There were no clothes in the room. The only type of clothing material found in the room was the label from a necktie. No hotel supplies or any type of weapon were found in the room either. The possibility of suicide was quickly removed as Owen had been bound with cords. However, after some more digging, the detectives found some clues that might lead to something. A hairpin, a safety pin, a cigarette, and a small unused bottle of dilute sulfuric acid. On top of that, the glass top of the telephone stand yielded 4 small fingerprints, possibly from a woman. After this discovery, they held Jean Owen for questioning, as she was the one that reported hearing the noises from the 10th floor earlier in the story. She was released shortly after police verified her alibi with her boyfriend, Joe Reinert. Another revelation would appear during the night of Roland T. Owen's death. During the night of the investigation, the police contacted Los Angeles police to get more information about Roland T. Owen. However, Los Angeles police were unable to find any record of a man going by the name Roland T. Owen. Questions began to arise as to whether Roland T. Owen was the actual name of the victim. The next day, January 6th, the police were convinced the victim had used an alias, as his name was not Roland T. Owen. Later on that day, they set up the body at the Melody McGilly Funeral Home, so maybe the public can help identify the person. A group of people showed the body, and among those people, one of them was Robert Lane. Lane was able to identify the person as the same man who had previously flagged him down on the 13th Street. He recognized the distinct deep scratch on the individual's arm, which he had observed during their encounter on that Thursday night. Lane was convinced that this was the very same person who had signaled him down to stop under strange circumstances. Lane explained to the police his encounter with the man. However, after some interviews with Lane, detectives were not as certain as Lane was that the man had been Owen, since none of the hotel staff had reported seeing him leave or return during the night of January 3rd through the 4th. One of the elevator operators, going by the name Charles Blotcher, was reported seeing strange occurrences on the president's 10th floor at midnight on January 3rd. Blocker recalled one visitor, a woman in particular, that was visiting male guests in their rooms. Thus, he believed that she was a prostitute and nothing else. At some point within 3 hours of his shift, a woman arrived and took the first place in line. He escorted her to the 10th floor, where she inquired about room 1026. Shortly after, the elevator was summoned once more to the same floor. To his surprise, it was the same woman, who seemed bewildered that her client was not occupying room 1046. She explained that he had contacted her and had always been present during her previous visits with him. 30 minutes after their initial encounter, Blocker received another elevator request to the 10th floor, where he found the same woman waiting. He escorted her to the lobby. An hour later, he accompanied her and a different man to the 9th floor. Later at 4:15 a.m., Blocker received a call from the woman on the 9th floor and escorted her to the lobby, after which she left the hotel for the night. 15 minutes later, The man who accompanied her called the same floor and informed Locker that he couldn't sleep and was going out for a walk. Nothing more was discovered about this strange interaction. Investigators once again at a loss. However, according to other hotel staff members, they recall seeing someone similar checking in at a different hotel under the name Eugene K. Scott, also given a Los Angeles address as well. Kansas City police would contact Los Angeles officials to see if there was a man who went under the name Eugene K. Scott. Nevertheless, Los Angeles police found no record of anyone living under the name Eugene K. Scott. Detectives were once again on a cold trail. Detectives would turn their attention to the mysterious Don. Who was this man and what kind of relationship did he have with Owen? Could it be the same individual who was present in Owen/Scott's room with the unidentified woman on Thursday night and Friday morning? Was it possible that the pair and the elevator operator had an interaction with that night? He might also be the hoarse-voiced man who declined Mary Soptic's request for towels when she knocked on room 1046's locked door on that Thursday afternoon. We do know that Owen told Soptic that he was expecting a couple of friends and to leave the door unlocked when she finished cleaning the room. She later heard him talking with Dawn on the phone. Despite this though, detectives were unable to get any leads on who this mysterious Dawn was. Within the next couple of days leading up, 2 new homicides in the city would lead detectives to dwindle away from the room 1046 case. More than a week later after the incident, progress from solving the case steadily declined and no new significant information had been presented. The answers to this cold case remained shrouded in mystery, leaving behind only unanswered questions, leaving once again a cold trail. 2 months later, on March 3rd, the case would resurface in the newspaper. The newspaper once again would report on the case when the funeral home where the deceased had been kept disclosed that they planned to bury the man in the city's Potter's Field the following day. However, on the same day, the funeral home received a phone call from an individual requesting a delay in the funeral arrangements. The caller stated that they wanted to send money to the funeral home for a grave and service at Memorial Park Cemetery in Kansas City, Kansas, so that the deceased could be buried close to his sister. When the funeral director cautioned the caller that they would need to inform the police about the call, the caller responded that they were aware and untroubled by this. When asked about the motive behind Owen's murder, the caller revealed more details. As per the caller, Owen had been involved in an extramarital affair while he was engaged to another woman. The caller, along with the 2 women involved, had arranged the meeting with Owen at the President Hotel as a form of revenge. The caller justified their actions by stating,
"Cheaters usually get what's coming to them,"
before abruptly ending the call. The service was postponed per the mysterious caller's request. On the other hand, on the 23rd of March, the funeral home received an envelope. The envelope contained $25, which was equivalent to $500 in today's currency, wrapped in newspaper. The amount was significant to cover the expenses, but the sender of the envelope remains unknown. Following a similar anonymous call, 2 more envelopes containing $5 each were sent to a nearby florist for the purchase of 13 American Beauty roses to be placed on the grave. Both phone calls were traced to payphones, and the payment for the flowers also included a card with disguised handwriting that read, "Love forever, Luis." Images of the dead man continued to be circulated nationwide in the hope of identifying him. This led to his identification when a friend of Ruby Ogletree in Birmingham, Alabama, recognized him in an article published by the American Weekly, a Sunday newspaper supplement owned by the Hartz Corporation. The man in the picture bore a striking resemblance to her son Artemis, who had been missing since 1934, when he set off to hitchhike to California. The family had received letters from him but had not seen him since. Ruby contacted the Kansas City police and gave them a good description of the man. Ruby identified Roland T. Owen was her son, who had left Birmingham in 1934 and whose real name is actually Artemis Ogletree, a 17-year-old. In the spring of 1935, Ruby had received 3 typed letters from her son, although they were delivered after his death. This raised suspicions as Artemis was not known to be proficient in typing, and the tone of the letter seemed strange and unfamiliar to Ruby with the use of slang language used in it. In May 1935, another lead purportedly from Artemis said he was going to Europe. It was followed by a special delivery letter saying that his ship was sailing that day. In August of the same year, Ruby received a phone call from Memphis, Tennessee. The caller claimed that Artemis had saved his life during a fight and was now residing in Cairo, Egypt, where he had married a wealthy woman and was doing well. The caller added that Artemis could not write because he had lost one of his thumbs during the fight, in which he saved the caller's life. Ruby talked with the man for half an hour. She recalled that he spoke wildly and irrationally, but seemed to have first-hand knowledge of Artemis. She gave the police the name the man identified himself by, however this name was never made public. There was no real evidence to suggest that Artemis had traveled overseas, especially to Egypt, under his own name before his death. None of the steamship companies had any record of his travel and could not find any proof that he had ever been there. The most recent leads brought up around this case was in 2003 and 2004 when John Horner, a local historian at the Kansas City Public Library, fielded a call from someone out of state who said they have been helping to inventory the belongings of an elderly person who had recently died. During their investigation, they came across a box containing numerous newspaper clippings related to the case. The caller informed them that in addition to the clippings, something mentioned in the news articles was also present in the box. The caller chose not to reveal their identity or the item's identity. The information about the call was not made public by Horner until he wrote 2 blog posts on the library's website in 2012, which he detailed the story's events. But other than that, that's the most recent that any type of evidence or clues have been brought up around room 1046. This leaves many theories and questions still unanswered. Who killed Artemis? Who was Dawn? Why was he killed? Did the woman and man mentioned by the elevator operator have anything to do with this? Who was Luis? After years or even decades of uncertainty, the truth behind this cold case is still shrouded in mystery. Unfortunately, despite the efforts of investigators, forensic experts, and community members, this cold case still remains unsolved. The truth behind what happened to the victim may never fully be known. We may never truly know what happened in room 1046.